Now, separate from the entire Snow White box office disaster, we are also dealing with the Alto Nights box office nightmare for Warner Brothers and its CEO David Zaslav, and exactly all the drama that's been going on between Robert De Niro and WB, and what's going on in between is actually quite interesting. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new, and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So one thing I will say about Robert De Niro is that this is one unhinged individual that really just blames anybody out there, whether it's Trump supporters, whether it's critics, or whether it's just people out there that refuse to watch anything Robert De Niro lately due to what he said back in 2024 about Trump supporters, calling them gangsters, calling them this and that, and even blaming the failure of his movie most recently on Trump supporters and Trump himself. That just goes to show you exactly how deranged Robert De Niro really has become over the past several years. And honestly, this is exactly why WB is done with him. This is why they are fed up. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty details about all of this, so let's actually focus on De Niro here. Now, what's interesting about all of this moving forward is the fact that we already know that WB is trying to rethink their strategy when it comes to their films, when it comes to their overall lineup of action movies. You know, we already know that they're doubling down on the Monsterverse and James Gunn's DC universe. They're trying to really make that their marketing core, right, to really attract new customers, to please the current customer base. But what's interesting about this is that we already know that the Alto Nights is a box office disaster. Why it was a flop? Well, they invested $45 to $50 million, even more than that when factoring in marketing expenses. We'll talk about the exact metrics in a minute. But as we stand right now, $6.6 million is what it made worldwide. Can you believe that? I mean, let that sink in for a moment. This movie only made $6.6 million worldwide. That's not domestic, that's everywhere. And Warner Brothers lost tens of millions of dollars. Now, with WB and its CEO David Zaslav already furious with Robert De Niro for bombing their film The Alto Nights, one monumental development going on now involves more to do with Robert De Niro after he was officially fired from WB after his political comments contributed to the failure of the Alto Nights. It turns out that initially Robert De Niro was set to develop multiple other mobster films with Warner Brothers that would be done in a similar fashion to both Goodfellas and Casino. However, these two mystery mobster films have now not only been called off by WB, but that also CEO David Zaslav finalized his plans to fire Robert De Niro altogether from not just those projects, but also from non-mobster roles that he was supposed to be involved in that were supposed to be announced by this summer, roughly June to July. These firings of Robert De Niro at WB had to do with two things, both his political comments toward Trump supporters and the box office performance of the Alto Nights and how he blamed Trump and his own supporters for that as well. The firing of De Niro was a swift decision made by David Zaslav after months of leaning on the fence on whether or not to fire De Niro altogether from the studio. Now, this came shortly after the board members pressured Zaslav to make a move and to make one fast. De Niro, get this, reportedly took the firing very personally and is already blaming WB for acting very unprofessional with their handling of the box office failure of the Alto Nights, and is even pressuring them to admit that they only fired him for political reasons. De Niro reacted in such a way towards Zaslav, where he blamed him as one of the most incompetent CEOs that fall into supporting Trump supporters. Now, this pretty much gotten to a point where he was very petty and made these very weak comments toward WB that De Niro spewed at WB, only created more tension behind the scenes and in the public, where the press tour for the Alto Nights, alright, this is where it gets really interesting, is now coming to a sudden halt, where 85% of De Niro's interviews have all been cancelled outright by WB. Hence why you're not going to be seeing or hearing from him in many instances on different TV shows, talk shows, of course, and radio programs. De Niro was also furious and actually reacted in a very erratic way toward WB after canceling those events outright and interviews, since he claims it disturbed his very busy schedule. De Niro finalized, of course, and De Niro's finalized firing at the studio comes shortly after they actually axed both George Clooney, Alec Baldwin, and several other projects along with Julia Roberts, all of which got way too involved in politics just like De Niro did. Now guys, before I move on, let me just say one thing about Zaslav. Now, This is why I think that Zaslav is a slightly better CEO than Bob Iger. At least he takes some form of direct action, not these little baby steps per se that Bob Iger does here and there where he dances around things. But David Zaslav takes action. Now look, that doesn't make him the best CEO or a great CEO. Sure, he does a good job on the Godzilla films, the MonsterVerse movies. We'll have to wait and see how he performs with the James Gunn universe of the DC franchise. That's going to be an interesting start of things as well. But when it comes to these mobster movies, when it comes to how they were going to double down on Robert De Niro and George Clooney, Julia Roberts, and Alec Baldwin, all these other actors and actresses that are just so politically involved, that come from a political landscape, and just shove it down the throats of the public, that's exactly why they are taking a stand back. They've realized that there is a complete cultural shift that started in November of 24 for obvious reasons. Ever since the 2024 election loss for the Democrats, we have seen a lot of things shifting within Hollywood, a lot of things shifting within the film industry, that's for certain. And that's exactly why they are beginning to realize that, yeah, maybe the loud noise is not a minority, maybe it's a majority. And so you have a lot of CEOs beginning to have that slow turn of the tide, right? But De Niro is not taking any of this well, especially after that rant he made just a couple of days ago that we covered about how he blamed Trump and Trump supporters for why the Alto Knights failed, saying how Trump basically is the one contributing to the death of cinema, to, destroying the overall art of filmmaking, all of this nonsense. Anyway, to close, already WB lost tens of millions of dollars on the Alto Knights, where they spent $55 million on the film when factoring in all the marketing and other expenses for promotional purposes. The film so far has, of course, not only garnered an alarming $6.6 million only worldwide, this is reportedly forcing Zaslav to rethink his entire strategy with the pipeline of films that are in stock right now that are in the works, which is why they are starting off by firing De Niro and then canceling those specific mobster films that De Niro was fired from. For a while, Zaslav, get this, held conversations with the board on a potential recast for those two mobster films that were going to star Robert De Niro after he was let go. However, recasting, of course, of those roles are now called off. They don't even want to make those films, and they are shifting away from that and focusing on James Gunn's DC universe instead, along with the MonsterVerse. So look, everything nowadays in the film industry, we know that universes are becoming a bigger and bigger thing. As much as a lot of people I know are getting very tired of universes, a lot of these studios are doubling down on that. You got Marvel, you got Star Wars, which is failing. You've got the MonsterVerse now. There's so many different things out there that have all these different sequels and spin-offs and side stories that all interconnect with each other, TV shows that connect to the movies. But Robert De Niro's mobster films, I think it's just time to call it quits for this guy. Now look, I'm no one to say who should retire at a certain age here or there, but Robert De Niro playing a mobster, it's just not believable anymore. Alright, when you're 80-some years old, it's just not believable at this point. In fact, this movie, The Alto Knights, is quite comedic when you have Robert De Niro facing Robert De Niro. That's all it really looks like on camera. But overall, I would like to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.